Hi, Suzanne, and hello, everybody.
Hi. Hello.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us in traversing the widest orbit.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yes,
So,
and what are we discussing today?
well, today I thought we would talk about the relationship between good and evil, or good and bad, if you will, and light and dark.
Oh, really interesting. And I think, do you have a PPT presentation for that, or
I do. I have a little image to share, and let me pull that up real quick. All right. Is that showing to you?
yes, it is
All right.
interesting.
So I'll just leave this up for a moment because it's very bright. But so it's very common uh, in a lot of people's thinking, even if it's not a well reflected view, but um, more of just an accepted view, to think of light as equivalent to good and dark as equivalent to evil or bad. And um, I, I think it's pretty, once we give thought to it, it's pretty clear to see that's an error. Rather, we should probably approach it as this image shows here, that in point of fact, there is good light and good dark, and evil light and evil dark. Um, the dark and the light themselves are best not thought of as like this as a binary. Easy enough to think of when we just think about, um, you know,
Hmm.
our everyday experience of light and dark. I'm going to stop sharing and there. So, right, just we were talking before about Kohak and what he says about um, the day and night. And there's not merely day and night, there's dawn and dusk, sort of this intermediate area. Um, and just like we can experience in our lives if we're paying attention day in and day out, we exist in all of that. And through twice a day, those transitional phases as well. Um, and so, just in terms of like a lot of the things that we're going to talk about, and the very concept of ontological pluralism and what have you, when we can shake that sort of unreflective metaphysics, if you will, where, dark is always bad and light is always good, we're better positioned, right, to explore whatever we want to
Yeah.
explore. Um,
It made me think about what we talked in the last episode, where we were discussing the difference between epistemic humility and ethical humility. And I was wondering if um, what you're saying here is also like related to ethical humility, where I mean, what would be the opposite of ethical humility? The idea that we know um, right from wrong in an absolute sense, and we also know the good in its absolute sense and the evil in its absolute sense. So, I mean, I think ethical humility then would precisely counter this binary or this binarism of thinking about good and evil in that way. So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and maybe at first glance for some it might not seem intuitive, but I think it's easy enough to think of simple examples,
Mhm.
that can bring it home, if you will. So the concept that we hear about it and people talk about right now, toxic positivity, right? The way in which embracing some kind of positivity worldview can often lead to denial, delusion, and minimization of factual reality. Certainly, I think most of us want positive, existence and are to be seen as positive people or exemplifying a positive mindset. But as you know, and a lot of people understand in philosophy, psychology, whatever discipline, it's pretty well established that it's not like a light switch you can flip. It's to become like a truly positive force, if you will, or a positive person. There's probably a lot of things one has to confront and grapple with that are not so positive, right? And so if we're going to be realistic and aim towards something of meaning, enduring meaning, then we have to acknowledge that there are instances where the light, if you will, is not good. Um, just take your run of the mill um, pastor, youth pastor, who was found to be a child abuser or likes to engage with child pornography. Clearly an example of what the image called evil light. Um, Likewise, good dark. I would hope that's pretty straightforward to people. Not only is darkness itself, as a state outdoors at night, full of good things. Doing shadow work, if you will, is an example of a good dark. Um, Forces and entities, whatever kinds of matters we want to discuss, I think this setup where we recognize the interrelations and that it's not that straightforward binary, it becomes pretty clear.
I mean, one example which is in a way an everyday example would be the concept of privacy, where and privacy understood in all its political significance, where I have the right and the dignity even to have an existence outside of the light of the public space,
Right,
outside of the world, watching me. So that would be an example of a good dark, or a kind of darkness which we have a right to. We need
right,
that darkness, and that darkness
right,
is a space of growth as well, because that's where we can do our personal development without the prying eyes of the state, or
right,
the society, and so on. So light is not always good, even when we think about this in political terms and not just
right.
So there's a lot of, uh, I mean, darkness has a lot of that political importance as well, and also um, even in interpersonal relationships,
Hmm.
uh, shining a light on everything is not necessarily good. And so
Right,
again, there is a role to darkness, which, although I'm bringing this to a kind of everyday level, but even at that level, one can see how the simple equation of dark is bad and light is good falls apart. And we can see this in our experience of our own lives as well. So that's another point to,
right.
I think, to keep in mind. I
I think so.
yeah, so I was wondering if we could go back to the to the image, to the representation of this, and be
Right. You want
curious.
me to pull it back up?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
The line that distinguishes between the two sides, and and how it's not a solid line. You were
Right.
telling me that that also has a significance in this representation. I was wondering if you could.
Right. So in the line between the dark and the light is the broken line, and between the good and the evil is solid.
Mm.
And again, by no means are we putting this forth as some kind of final truth, because that is inherently what we are opposed to. Um, the ontological pluralism, we want to think plurally and more fully as much as we're able. But clearly, light and dark, as you just noted, even with having privacy, for I mean, there's the simplest parts where it's like, really, do you want someone watching you 24 hours a day when you go to the bathroom? I mean, it's like some of it's sort of obvious. And, before you've had a chance to have your coffee in the morning, you don't necessarily want to be brought out into the light. But like you mentioned, just time for reflection, personal time, thinking, the sort of work we do behind the scenes, so to speak, in preparation for sharing something with a partner or with the world, with our students. Um, and then obviously day and night. We can think of sleeping, right? In a way, we can think of sleeping as a darkness, if you will, right? The consciousness goes dark in a certain sense. Obviously, a lot's going on there, especially in the dreaming. Um, but yeah, so that line between dark and light, it shouldn't be a solid line. And we, move freely back and forth as we must in the physical world, on an earth that rotates and then goes around the sun. And likewise, just in our thinking and in our being. Um, Whereas the line between the evil and the good, might be understood as not necessarily solid, but certainly a little more uh,
Strict.
graspable,
Graspable.
graspable, or and again, epistemic humility, ethical humility is required. What one person might deem evil might very well seem good to someone else, and then that's where we would have to hash it out. Most certainly, making sure that there's not the assertion of some kind of final truth or one truth, right? Which is onto theological metaphysics, and we reject that. Um, but yeah, so dreaming, doing dream work, doing shadow work, you go to see your therapist, everything you share with your therapist is certainly not something you necessarily want to share with your partner. I think you were just talking about the way people in relationships, friendship, romantic or otherwise, it isn't necessary. I mean, some people might wrongly think they want to know everything about another person. And my response there would be, one, it's impossible, first of all. The other is infinite. And even if you told me everything you can think of to tell me over a lifetime, I would never know what it's like to be you. And that's just the nature of reality.
So,
Um,
just to repeat, did you say that the other is infinite?
right. Yeah. And
Beautiful.
that's a
Yeah.
line, that's Levinas.
Levinas. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I think in our culture, uh, what we might call this modern or postmodern culture, all these errant ideas about what real love is or real friendship often involve some kind of strange idea that, you can find a person, whether a lover or a friend, and that person can know you completely. And
Mm.
that in itself is questionable because, I mean, I don't know that we can even say an individual person can ever know themselves completely, even if our whole lifetime purpose has been to know thyself.
Yes.
Um, I know for me, I can have a dream and wake up and be like, wow, there was content in that dream that I have never consciously had in my mind before.
Mhm.
So, right there was something inside of me unconcealing, of which I had no awareness prior to its unconcealment.
Right.
Um,
And the concealment dimension of that is not a secondary characteristic. The unconcealment requires this concealment as its
right,
precondition. And again, so the dark is not an afterthought in this. So
right,
it is the space from which that which is unconcealing sort of grows, hibernates,
right,
develops, So again,
right,
the privacy example to me comes in mind because it's the private sphere where this the development happens and then it goes out. I was also thinking about how the quest for light and the 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 thought that light can be gained or can be captured fully can also be very oppressive. And
Right.
in the philosophical tradition, um, people like Derrida and others have pointed to this hubris in the philosophical tradition, where light and bringing things to light and the belief that things can be brought to light fully, you know, itself becomes a violent act where that which
Right.
is concealed, that which is negative, that which is in between, all those elements are ignored. And that ignoring has caused innumerable and sometimes even irreparable damage. So, yeah, so
Right.
what you are saying goes to the very heart of a lot of important discussions in philosophy as well, and obviously it does. But it is not restricted to only the ethical domain, is what I wanted to, it's also something that flows into
Right.
the more philosophical, cognitive domains as well. So
Right.
if I could just add one more thing, and this
Yeah.
is something that we have already discussed, but if we were to uh, ask for a cinematic representation of the breaking of this binary or the representation of the porousness of this binary, one could one could go to the movie Midsommar by Ari Aster, and
Hmm.
and the way that he portrays light, an unending light, because this light is, it is like all except one or two scenes, the entire film is flooded with light. And
Right.
he was able to show the oppressiveness of light sometimes, and then and that oppressiveness and the capacity for light to be oppressive breaks this binary too, that often puts light as good, but here
Right.
light itself becomes a kind of negative force. So it's really interesting that way too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what when you're talking about that film, I'm going to stop sharing the screen
Yeah,
and
sure.
go
Yeah.
back. Just so bright, too much light. Right.
Yeah.
Um, but so a couple things came to mind when you referenced the film, which at some point maybe we can do one on the film and look at some scenes and go more in depth. But just the fact that up on our earth, there are locales where people live and they have parts of the year where that continuous cycle of dark and light is disrupted,
Yes.
right? And so they have a period of continual darkness for some time or continual light. And I just think that that's, in itself as a phenomenon, right, that some humans experience if they live in these places or they visit these places. It's just another way in which, you know, we can reflect on this idea. And certainly people, as you know, when horrible crimes take place in broad daylight, right? There's this sort of shock that could occur. Yet, it
Yeah.
shouldn't be shocking because bad and evil doesn't abide by that in any way. Um,
Sorry to interrupt you, but this reminds me of the Poe story about something being hidden in broad day. I mean,
there you
something
go.
being
Yeah.
hidden in plain sight.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, in fact,
Exactly.
it would be the perfect way to hide something, would be to hide it in
Right.
broad daylight.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I was pointing toward with my example of a youth pastor who's really a
Yeah.
child abuser, or people that are predators and who purposefully then seek out these kinds of outward facades,
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
of whatever kind, as sort of a cover for what they are
Mm.
and what they
Good,
do.
good point. Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
when you were talking about just the private public distinction, just in our lives too, the other thing that jumped to mind um, was, just that idea. I think Jung, others have articulated it, and this is just my paraphrasing, but it's because it's something I say on occasion to whoever. But you must confront and develop a relationship with your demons or your
Yeah.
shadows, or else you become their slave. And I think that's borne out certainly with the psychology of familial cycles of abuse and things like that. Um, when we refuse to look at something, whether in ourselves or in the world or in others, we actually give that thing more power. Granted, we might suppress it and it show up in another form, um, but certainly uh, the dark. Uh, I mean, another thing that I'd like to point out is all life begins in darkness, whether it's the seed in the dark earth or the gestating, embryo fetus in the dark womb.
Yeah.
Um, we come from darkness, and we will return to it in one form or another. At night when we go to sleep, you could again that we could see that as sort of a return to it, to that realm or to that state. And then when we these physical bodies uh, cease, there again. And so yeah, there's just a lot to be done with it, a lot to think about. And obviously, there's plenty of people who do embrace the ideas we're talking about. But I think a lot of times, just on a more superficial level or what have you, popular culture or sort of randomly embraced ideas, there's this strange default that's a false binary. And it's better just to make it conscious, to bring it to awareness
Yeah.
and offer people the chance to reflect on it for themselves, to see how it might apply, or make something more understandable. You said something earlier. I don't remember what your exact words were, but in my brain, I immediately thought, when we shine a light into the darkness, that which is in shadow becomes darker still. Right. And so we can do it physically, phenomenologically, right? We take a flashlight and let's go in a pitch black room where there is no light. And when you shine that light, when you pay attention, you'll realize that anything that's in shadow becomes even harder to see,
Interesting.
right? Because of that brightness.
Mm.
And so again, there we can jump off into all kinds of
There is
places, Plato's caves and
yeah,
what have
yeah, and there is also the mystical tradition where this uh, what you just said is so wonderful that but first also the breaking of that binary between the light and the dark is also a very common trope and also a methodology, philosophical methodology among the mystics and among theologians who take an apophatic or negative approach to speaking about God, where I mean, there's this phrase which is, I mean, it's an amazing phrase. I read it first in this French um, uh, writer and philosopher of mysticism, especially focusing on Islamic mysticism. But he also was inspired by Heidegger, and his name is, and by Jung also. His name is Henry Corbin. That's the English pronunciation. And in one of his texts, I don't remember which, he talks about the mystical experience as the experience of the midnight sun.
you.
The
Mm,
and I found that really when I read it, I knew that I won't forget this phrase.
mhm,
And the idea is that it is in the darkness where all the other superficial lights are gone, meaning
mhm,
all the positive ways in which the ultimate could be defined and categorized when they are switched off. it is then in that darkness, in that cloud of unknowing, to use another mystical reference, it is in that cloud of dark unknowing that the sun will shine. So the mystics, um, both in their ethics, in how they trouble the distinction between good and bad, and in their contemplative experience of this ultimate and how they speak about that experience. Yeah, they bring together the dark and the light, and the dark is important for them. Without the dark,
Right.
without that darkness of God's sheer indescribability, his sheer absence, that darkness is is vital for that sun to shine.
Right.
And so, yeah, so again, what you're saying also has so much resonance in the mystical tradition as well. And I think both
Yes.
in all the mystical tradition, I think there's
Right. No, I think so too. Because I was gonna, bring that up with you to ask you about that in terms of your own background knowledge. And then something else that came to mind when you were speaking about that, um, is that, I always, when I'm trying to explain it to a student, or I will call it the power of negation.
yeah,
And, you know, um, for example, my personal example that I give to my students, and I actually say, hey, maybe do this as an experiment. Um, I say, look, I didn't know the power television had on me until I got rid of it. And I got rid of it in 2005. And I didn't even watch anything for, geez, maybe 6, 7 years.
hmm,
Before I began to watch shows or movies again. And I don't watch television now. I can't stand advertising. But that is an example of the power of negation. Again, the idea being that you can't possibly know the power of something until it is not there. And so when you were, talking about the mystical idea, with the negation or and I know with Heidegger, the absence, the withdrawing
withdrawing.
of the God,
Yeah.
that, when the gods have withdrawn, there is a potential there for something that isn't there otherwise. And his, Heidegger with the nothing is not merely no thing. Nothing is just to put it in a simple manner, a empty space in which something can arise, being itself can emerge anew.
Hmm.
And so the nothing noths. But I think that just goes with what you're describing, that the mystics point toward, and it just makes me think of, what a lot of us perhaps can identify with, just with about, laying down at night to go to sleep, and that space of time prior to actually falling asleep where it's dark, right? And if we're able to, calm that neurotic monkey mind monologue nonsense, there is it's like a presence in the nothing. It's there's something there. I think, that's the aim of a lot of meditation, if you will, is just to feel that even for a moment, that emptiness isn't
It's pregnant
no
with
thing. It's, yes, there you go. It's a pregnant emptiness. And so I think all these things can be, woven together very nicely. Um, but I like did you say the term was black sun? Was that the
the
term?
midnight sun.
Midnight sun.
It,
Because funny enough, what jumped in my mind is Soundgarden song, The Black Hole Sun, right? Black Hole Sun. And I know I've seen images, right, where it's almost like an eclipse,
hmm,
where when they're talking about a midnight sun, and it's like medieval, I guess, drawings or wood carvings, right, with
right.
a black sun,
Hmm,
but a midnight sun.
yeah.
So yeah, I was actually going to ask you though, did anything else in particular come to mind from any particular mystic that you've looked at beyond that phrase?
Well, they the main thing that came to mind for me is how they're able to overcome that binary and
Mm,
emphasize on that darkness. And
mhm.
practitioners, devotional mystics who are also like not just we know their practice, not just their text, their metaphysics.
Right.
To them, God is often not easy. God is absent. God is also, I mean, they get the presence of God in the most immense way. That is also there, but God is also not that easy. He also so transcendent. He is absent. He's withdrawn, and this combination of these experiences of God's absence and His presence is central to mysticism. And I think that they have seen this aspect of the light and the dark quite closely. And so that's where those experiences are coming from. That's what actually generally struck me. Uh, but there are many mystics that we could maybe go to, maybe in later videos and so on, where we can actually go see their words and how they're talking about this aspect in their texts.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Something else that comes to mind real quick is I think people I think the common term is
mm,
deprivation practices.
mm,
Um, there might be a word I should be thinking of and I'm not, but you know the you can
mm,
get in these you can go and actually, you are put into a chamber where you float in water. Sensory deprivation, I
sensory
believe. Yeah.
deprivation. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that just came to mind too as just sort of an interesting I haven't done it, but now I'm really interested, like, wow, would I experience that as quite mystical, or something
Yeah.
like we're talking about, where there's by means
Well,
of the
there
utter
is
absence.
also this emptying of the self,
Hmm.
of the mind, but also of the sensory input and
Mm,
stimuli,
mm,
which can produce positive results. What those results are, they would be difficult to describe, but yeah, the importance of the negative, as you put it, the power of
right,
negation. Yeah.
right.
So Hegel was
Yeah.
also someone who was very much attuned to the power of negation and of contradiction.
Mhm.
So again, the philosophical tradition, as much as the mystical tradition, is rich with thought about this. So yeah. So we should maybe in future videos return to some of these ideas, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. So many things came to mind during this one.
Yes.
So because right then I thought immediately about that interesting, it's just this very cool and interesting line in Heidegger's Building Dwelling Thinking, where he basically says that humans are the ones who can learn to practice and put to use death
Yeah.
so that they may become capable of the good death.
Right.
And what actually came to mind first was I don't know if you've read or heard about any people who practice this, but it's a practice where you go and you lay down in the earth, in a coffin or just in the earth. And you're covered. Obviously, they don't cover you with dirt where you can't breathe, but it's a practice of deprivation. It's sort of a ritualistic
Yeah.
death, and again with all kinds of powerful impacts and outcomes, and
Yeah.
made me when you're saying getting rid of sensation, you know um, it's funny though because more and more people seem unable or unwilling to even just sit quietly alone in a
Yeah.
room.
That is the big trouble of our time, I guess. The impossibility to shut things out and then to be with oneself and to bear oneself when things are shut out. So yeah, so
Right.
so again, these ideas have practical importance too in the age that we are living in. So yeah. So
Yes.
I think then that would be our reflections for the day. We will definitely return to some of the ideas that came up, by which I mean the ideas that were taking us in other interesting directions. So
In the orbit.
yeah, absolutely, that's the whole spirit of the channel and what we are trying to do. So that would be,
Please
yeah,
like and subscribe,
like and
right?
subscribe, absolutely, please. That would help us reach more people, and so yeah, and spread that orbit of the channel as far
Right.
as we can. So
Right.
yeah, so until next time,
All
thank you.
right. Thanks. See ya.